So what brings you joy? As Ms. Susan told you, Susan and I did not collaborate upon our work this morning, and we giggled in the office suite area to find out that we were very much on the same path of the difference between happiness and joy just moments before the 9 o'clock service began. But what brings you joy? Because there's a big difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is a fleeting experience of emotion, but joy is something deep down inside. So I want you to take a moment, think about it, and turn to someone near you and tell them what brings you joy. And if you're not sitting next to someone, move. Simple. It's okay. I can tell when you're not sitting next to somebody. Even someone I made a commitment to 40 years ago isn't sitting next to somebody. He shall move. Yeah, I see him. He can. Wow, that was tough. Randy's the only one who gets a free pass. He's got to stick with the machines. So, I'm going to tell you, I had an opportunity. I'm going to let you share out loud in a moment, but I had an opportunity yesterday, and it is something that brings me great joy. I was blessed to officiate at a wedding. They bring me great joy. I have officiated at Steve and Kathy's wedding this summer, and oh, look at this. I officiated at Jay's wedding, and weddings, my heart fills with joy when I have the blessing of being able to be at your weddings and to get to stand there and look at the way you look in each other's eyes. So yesterday I got to do it all over again. Or when I get to go, when someone calls and says, the baby was just born, guess who gets to go to the hospital? Try and keep me from going, and I get to hold that baby, and babies smell, oh my gosh, like they literally have come from heaven. And that is something that does not fade. That is a joy deep down in my soul, and to claim it as anything other than a gift from God. Marty can tell you on her wedding day to Jay this past summer, that as her family gathered around her, I would think that was one of the great joys in your life. So I named that for her. But shout out, what are some of the moments of joy in your lives? Grandchildren. Conversations, when you connect with people at a deep level. Oh, I shouldn't have said weddings, so some people in the audience could have said it. We need those deep reservoirs of joy to keep us going through moments when life gets tough. Because the truth is, we know life gets tough. We have those times in our lives when if we didn't have those deep reservoirs of joy to call upon, those moments of peace and those moments of joy and those moments in which we know that God has gotten us through, it would be hard to put 2 feet, 1 foot in front of the other. And I think that it's not just today. Sometimes you listen to the news and you would think that we invented difficult times. It's not true. It's been forever and ever. And so when Jesus was coming down from that mountain in this passage from Luke, he had called the 12 disciples after a nice teaching period with a group of people, called the 12 disciples to follow him. They had gone up to the mountain. And so, we think of Jesus, we always say about Jesus, he was fully human and fully divine. And so, someone who's fully human, fully divine, he's got all this energy, all this pep. Well, the fully human part of him got tired like we get tired. And he knew he needed to refresh and restore and renew himself. And so frequently we read he would go up the mountain, he would go off and pray, he would restore himself. So they went up to the mountain after a big teaching time with the people. And when he came down, no sooner does he come down that mountain and there is a crowd around him. And the crowd, as crowds do, generally kind of press in upon one another. And there's something about crowds. And we know this. There's kind of a mentality about it. Because in a crowd, people have anonymity. They just, kind of forget the individuality of it, and there's this kind of crowd push behavior. And maybe, not maybe, it's kind of why we started thinking about this neighboring movement, or I started thinking about the neighboring movement, because society has gotten to a point where, we kind of look at our lives and the people around us as a crowd, as opposed to really looking at them as individuals. And so I wanted us to stop and pause and look at the people around us as special people. And so the very first week, what I asked you to do is just start observing the houses that were closest to you. No longer just a group of houses that surrounded your house, but, really start observing the houses that were closest to your front door and their particularities. And that was a pretty simple thing to do. And so you took them out of that crowd mentality and started seeing them as individual, unique places. And then we started praying for the individual, unique people that were inside those homes. But, in a crowd, there's a certain kind of behavior that overtakes the people. And what they will do is kind of move together and kind of not necessarily respect the space of one another. And this particular crowd had a purpose. And the purpose of this crowd was to get closer to Jesus. Because what they knew about Jesus is he had already gone around and healed people. That just by his touching them or them touching him, people had been healed. They also had heard that he had done a lot of teaching, and that teaching had done not only the physical healing, but some good spiritual healing and some dispelling of demons. And so they really wanted to get close to this guy. And they weren't necessarily worried about the sweet little grandma who might be standing in front of them. Because if you are just a part of a crowd and just people are just, numbers in front of you, you're just going to push your way through. You're not thinking of her as your cousin's grandma or the lady that lives next door. She's just a body in the way, and you just kind of push your way through. And this crowd mentality was something that was part of the group of people that was trying to get close to Jesus. And they were trying to get close to Jesus. It was their whole intention to make sure that they were getting close to this one who could literally do that thing that they had heard he could do. That literally, by making contact with him, they could be healed. And so in their pushing their way through, they were just being part of this body. So they had a purpose. They wanted to get close to him. They knew that getting close to them would fill some sort of need that they had, and they were going to do whatever it took to make that happen. Now, what's interesting about this crowd is they weren't looking necessarily for Jesus to reach out to them. They were going to touch Jesus because the energy would flow from him to them just by their reaching out to Jesus. And so we start thinking what it means when people get together and there's this, all of a sudden, even though they're this crowd, if they have some sort of purpose, group purpose, even if like they didn't necessarily look at each other before as a group, but all of a sudden, as a group, they have this dynamic of purpose, like a community. And even if, they kind of thought of themselves as just being thrown together, but now they're thrown together and they have some commonality, and so they're moving towards this purpose, and then there's this commonality, and there's this God thing in the middle. and they're being drawn by God to move closer as individuals. And this amazing thing happens to them, and they are being healed. As we've been moving through this neighboring process, we've gone from just the anonymity of just thinking of these buildings and looking at what's special about them on the outside and praying for the people inside, and then beginning to think about these people as being those who possess individual abilities and gifts given by God, and praying for them to have healthy relationships, knowing that if they as individuals have healthy relationships in their own lives, as we come to know them, that we will have healthier relationships as a group, and that not only will we have healthier relationships with them one-on-one, but that our community as a whole will have healthier relationships, and this will spill out onto our city. But that to make a really good neighborhood, this other component of joy is a necessity, because God gives us individual gifts and talents. And if we all combine our individual gifts and talents, and we have a purpose, and then we have healthy relationships so we can get along together, and then we have this wonderful component of joy, which gives us an energy and a positiveness and a reason to move forward with an expectation of good. We can move mountains together as a community. Now, what we're initially hoping is that you'll be doing this in your neighborhood, and what we're hoping then that the next phase we'll be doing this as the community around the church. But then we're hoping that as we do this as a community around the church, it'll continue to spread in different parts of our city. And what if that is what God has been, not what if, God's been calling us to do that as disciples of Jesus Christ all along. Because as followers of Jesus Christ, we're supposed to be spreading the good news. That's our call. To make followers of the one who came to show us how to walk in the ways of the Lord. Now, it's simple. We say it all the time. All we're supposed to do is love God with our whole being and to love one another. But somehow or other, we forgot all the little pieces that make that happen. We forgot that it means looking at one another in the eyes and recognizing each other as individuals. We're not just a crowd. We're individually gifted and graced by God with unimaginable abilities and talents. But we won't be able to tap into those abilities and talents until we really see each other as individuals and get to know each other as individuals and have those kind of deep conversations, Norm, that make a difference in one another's lives. Because if all we know each other is those 3-minute conversations over a cup of coffee in passing, it's just a surface relationship. But if we actually sit down and start to share our lives with one another, then what starts to happen is we build community in the real sense of the word community. And then we could start to think about that common purpose of what we can do together. Those people that surrounded Jesus that wanted healing and wholeness, they wanted something greater than just being broken and living with that for the rest of their lives. They knew there was something better, and some other people had experienced it, and they wanted to experience it too. And I believe that's what we want. We want that not only for ourselves as individuals, but we want that for our faith community, and that we want that for the community in which we live called Topeka. We want Topeka to thrive. It's starting to happen downtown, and we get excited when we hear about the great things that are happening downtown. I want it to happen all over. I want this whole city just to be a place of joy and happiness where people who coming into the city will say, wow, that's a great place to live. When the Great Plains Conference moved to Topeka, at first people were worried about what to do. And now when I run into conference employees and they're talking about, I'm just getting settled in and I'm hearing about the southwest part of town. And I'm saying to them, well, check out downtown and make sure you go to here and go to there. We need to be able to look upon the whole community as a community that God has blessed and graced for fruitfulness. And the fruitfulness needs to be about sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. And we do that by living full and abundant lives. So this week, my challenge to you is as you pray for the 8 houses closest to your front door, pray that the people around you live joy-filled lives, knowing that it's not just the surface happy, it's not just you hope that they have a fun treat at the end of Sunday dinner, but that they have that deep well of joy in their lives that can help them be sustained through the hard times so that they can get through to find new ways to live lives of abundance and fruitfulness. May all the glory be to God. Amen.